Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important and interesting tech news in Asia. Today is Monday, the 20th of April, 2026. Let's get right to it. I want to talk about Deepseek's potential funding and what it means. And later in the program, we'll be joined by Jenkins, CTO Cloud Computing Services at Akamai, to explore the importance of inference against changing expectations of artificial intelligence, navigating it in this diverse region, and challenges, and also address the architectural trade-offs between cloud, edge, and on-device compute. Following that, we'll welcome Lee Jin, co-founder at Tictag, to discuss how internal teams can actually build and deploy AI agents themselves, not just buy SaaS tools, but get their ops, finance, and product people running agentic workflows using tools like Claude Code. Finally, Anand Nirgudkar, CTO at Funding Societies, will talk to us about how agentic AI is reshaping SME financing and digital lending in Southeast Asia. Before we get to the news, let's hear a little bit about our partner, Twilio. Twilio is the secure and scalable platform to build amazing customer engagement without the complexity, with the AI-driven workflows you need to connect. They are trusted by over 300,000 businesses. It is the platform that makes more possible. Visit twilio.com to start building today. Okay, let's get to the news. Reuters reported on April 17th that Deepseek is discussing raising at least $300 million at a roughly $10 billion valuation. Now, just for context, Deepseek is a Chinese AI company based in Guangzhou that builds large language models and reasoning models for chat, coding, and API use. You may remember that it became globally prominent in January of 2025 because it released a high-performing, relatively low-cost, open-weight, open-source model that was Deepseek R1, which many people saw as proof that a Chinese lab could compete with top Western systems while spending less and sharing more of its work publicly. Deepseek's reported fundraise may be the clearest sign yet that China's most visible open model company is crossing from breakout research brand into a capital-intensive platform builder. The deeper question is whether this round marks the start of a durable Asian AI champion or simply the moment when Deepseek collides with the same hard realities facing every other frontier lab: compute scarcity, geopolitical constraints, and the brutal economics of scaling AI. Let's think about what does this funding round really signal about Deepseek's evolution from open model disruptor to full-scale AI platform company. As we said before, Reuters reported on April 17th that Deepseek is discussing raising at least $300 million at about a $10 billion valuation, and that it had previously turned down funding from major Chinese VCs and tech firms. That's a meaningful change in posture. A company that once looked unusually insulated by founder control and high-flyer backing now appears to be acknowledging that frontier AI has become structurally capital-intensive, just like it is everywhere else in the world. The most important clue is not the size of the round itself, but why now? Reuters explicitly ties the possible raise to the intense capital requirements of building and operating top-end models as reasoning systems and agentic products just simply become more demanding. In other words, Deepseek may have won attention through efficiency and openness, but staying relevant likely requires more spending on training, inference, talent, and actually building products that people want to use. Real productization. Remember, Deepseek's brand was built on a different narrative from most labs: low cost, open source, technically elegant, and not primarily commercial. Reuters noted in 2025 that founder Liang Wenfeng framed open source as partly a matter of culture and influence rather than near-term monetization. And that makes this moment, where they're going to go for a really big capital raise, actually especially significant. The company seems to be moving from research prestige and ecosystem leverage toward a more conventional platform company logic. This sounds very similar, frankly, to what OpenAI was doing. There is evidence that this shift has a business basis. Reuters reported strong user uptake after Deepseek's breakout, including 22.2 million daily active users in China in January 2025 alone, and said firms like Snowflake added DeepSeek models after customer demand. People wanted to use it, no question about it. And that suggests that DeepSeek already has what many labs lack: not just benchmark fame, but actual distribution pull. And in a country like China, that could be actually huge. And if they target the rest of the world, could be even bigger. The likely reason to raise now is to convert that pull into durable products and infrastructure before competitors actually catch up. The bottom line to me is this. This round looks less like a vanity markup and more like an admission that even the most efficient open model winner eventually has to fund the boring but decisive parts of the business: compute, deployment, reliability, and distribution. There's no getting away from the fact that if you actually want to run a big frontier lab, you're going to need some money. You may not have to have 122 billion. You may not even need 30 billion, but you're going to need some money because building this stuff is not free. Let's talk a little bit about the valuation. Does a $10 billion valuation make strategic sense in the context of China's AI market and global frontier model economics? I mean, it seems to me that, yeah. I mean, look at where some of the other frontier models are valued. Like I said, OpenAI valued at $852 billion. Anthropic was offered money, turned it down apparently, but again, to get them up to the same level, around $850 billion, right? So a $10 billion valuation would place Deepseek squarely in the same league as the upper tier of China's AI labs, rather than in some isolated curiosity category. Reuters reported that Moonshot is seeking to raise $1 billion at an $18 billion valuation, while StepFund has been linked to a $10 billion IPO target, and Minimax previously pursued public market valuations in the mid-single-digit billions. In that context, $10 billion does not look outlandish to me for one of China's most globally recognized AI brands. I mean, at some level, the more interesting question is whether $10 billion reflects current cash flows or strategic optionality. I mean, to me, I don't even care what the cash flows are. At some level, I do. But markets are like forward-looking and they're predictive mechanisms. And what they're predicting is that this is going to be worth $10 billion at some point, right? They're forecasting out that. China's AI labs are still generally loss-making, just like they are all over the world. Reuters reported that Jipu lost 4.72 billion won in 2025, while Minimax posted a $1.87 billion net loss in 2025 as well. And that tells you the market is still valuing these companies primarily on what they expect to come in the future: ecosystem control and model relevance, not mature profitability. Again, just like OpenAI and Anthropic, those companies are not profitable either and probably not close to being profitable, right? Deepseek may deserve a premium within China because it changed the market's rules. Reuters said its low-cost releases pushed open-source, low-price competition to the center of China's AI ecosystem and helped normalize the idea that Chinese labs could challenge Western labs through software efficiency and aggressive pricing rather than pure compute abundance. And at some level, right, you can get almost there. If you can do it cheaper, but get almost there, you don't have to be 100% of what's happening at OpenAI and Anthropic, but if you can be way less expensive, you're going to get a lot of people to use it. And that kind of category-defining influence often commands a valuation premium beyond revenue multiples, and that's, to me, what it seems like Deepseek is doing. But there is kind of a ceiling to that logic as well. Reuters argues that China's current AI boom is increasingly about cheap tokens and inference efficiency, and that this can create utility-like economics and destructive price competition if model quality does not keep pace. So $10 billion is plausible if DeepSeek becomes a platform with sticky developer and enterprise adoption. It is less compelling if open models become interchangeable commodities, though. And my read on this is this. $10 billion is strategically understandable because $10 billion, yeah? Because DeepSeek has brand, mindshare, and ecosystem importance. Everybody's heard of it now. I mean, it exploded back in January 2025, and I think people are still talking about it, yeah? But it only looks cheap rather than merely plausible if DeepSeek can prove it is more than the company that started China's open model price war, right? They have to do more than that. They have to be better. How exposed is DeepSeek, though, to the compute problem, export controls, NVIDIA dependence, and China's push for domestic chips? And I think this is the central risk, right? We spent a lot of time talking about those export controls and import controls in China and whether the Chinese model makers, and then hence the Chinese chip makers, can actually make chips domestically that can get close to competing with NVIDIA in the short to medium term. And Reuters reported in February that Deepseek did not show its flagship model to U.S. chip makers for optimization, breaking with common industry practice, and separately reported the U.S. officials' claims that one of Deepseek's latest models was trained on NVIDIA Blackwell chips, which are banned for export to China. Now, think about this. Every time we talk about this, we say, look, there are black markets for everything. There are black markets for arms. There are black markets for everything possible, right? And the idea, the naivete that at some level Deepseek wasn't able to get one of these Blackwell chips or a set of these Blackwell chips, to me, is just pure fantasy. They may not have enough to run like their entire business on it, but I'm pretty sure that they've been testing on these Blackwell chips. And whether or not every detail proves out, the picture's clear. Deepseek's technical edge remains entangled with the geopolitics of advanced compute. And at the same time, the broader China story is not simply that they're completely cut off. Brookings notes that U.S. export controls have made large-scale compute harder to access in the near term, but have also pushed Chinese labs towards model efficiency, domestic chip development, and tighter hardware-software integration. Reuters makes a very similar point from a market angle. China's AI firms are leaning into cheaper inference, domestic processors, and software efficiency to compensate for weaker hardware. And again, this is scary, right? Because if they can do all that stuff with weaker hardware and they can be tightly integrated, but they can still get close, what does that mean when they're going to have chips that are equal to or better than what NVIDIA is producing right now? And that also helps explain why online discussion around Deepseek, mixes admiration with anxiety. The admiration is about model quality relative to apparent cost. I mean, that was always the case with this company, right? But the fear is that the company's future may depend on how successfully it can bridge from opportunistic access to NVIDIA hardware to a more resilient domestic compute base. Reuters reported China is actively pushing local firms to reduce reliance on foreign processors, and Zhipu has already been cited as accelerating a pivot towards domestic chips. We know that the Chinese government is not only encouraging private investment into these type of chip making, but the Chinese government is also subsidizing it as well. Okay, the problem is that domestic substitution is not yet equivalent substitution, but Reuters argues that Chinese firms still trail in overall frontier capability, partly because access to the best hardware remains constrained, while Brookings says export controls are likely to slow China in the short term, even if they do not stop it in the long run. So the Deepseek bull case is efficiency plus adapting to whatever, like the best hardware and software that they can get. The bear case is still compute constrained when the frontier gets more expensive. I mean, look, in plain English, Deepseek's genius may be software and architecture, but its fate is still tied to who controls the highest end chips. And that makes compute independence not a side issue, but probably the main strategic issue. I do think over time this is going to get solved. I really do. The Chinese have been very, very efficient and very good at catching up to Western technology when it becomes completely necessary. And I guess the final thing is, what does Deepseek's rise mean for Asia's AI ecosystem more broadly, especially the contest between open models, state-compatible capital, and global AI influence? Well, Deepseek has already had a market-shaping effect inside of China. Reuters says its breakthrough helped make low-cost, open-source AI the norm in China's ecosystem, and competitors from Alibaba to ByteDance to Zhipu moved quickly to respond with their own launches and upgrades. So even if Deepseek is no longer unique technically, it was still the company that changed the competitive grammar of the market. But the next phase of the Asian AI may be less about open-source idealism and more about financing structure. That's what I expect to happen. Almost completely, right? Because you can only be so open source idealistic. And open source is fine. We love open source. We use a lot of open source tools ourselves. But at some point, you're going to have to make money. And I think that's one of the reasons why Deepseek is thinking about raising all this money that we just discussed. Reuters reported also that StepFund is unwinding its offshore structure to prepare for a Hong Kong listing because Beijing has tightened scrutiny of the old red chip model. Moonshot is reportedly weighing similar questions. And this matters because capital formation in Chinese AI is becoming more state compatible, more domestically legible, and more tied to Hong Kong and onshore structures. And that's at the impetus of the government, yeah? Deepseek's round lands right in the middle of that transition. And there's also a regional implication beyond China. Reuters reported that Zhipu has been expanding abroad, particularly in Southeast Asia. We've seen the EV companies do it. We expect the pure tech companies to do it as well. And that suggests Chinese labs are not only competing domestically on price and openness, they are also exporting AI infrastructure, model access, and developer ecosystems into the rest of Asia and into Southeast Asia in particular. And if Deepseek raises meaningful capital, it could become one of the most visible vehicles for that expansion. But the geopolitics cut both ways. Deepseek's recognition on X, Reddit, and developer circles reflects a genuine cross-border fascination with high-performing open models. Search results show fresh social discussion around its prospective funding and future releases, while Reuters has documented strong developer demand for its models and the way its earlier release forced US labs to study its methods closely. It's really important, right? Because as I said earlier, if they're chip constrained, if they're power constrained, if they're hardware constrained, their software and their chip integration to get the lowest cost inference is going to have to be really impressive. And once they learn how to do that, you have to consider what's going to happen when they get the best hardware, when they get the best chips, when they get the best CPUs to control all this stuff together, and when they can build the best AI data centers, right? This is really important. But the same cross-border attention also intensifies scrutiny over export controls, military links, and technological dependence. Okay, let's welcome our guests. Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. Look, we wanted to have you on to talk about the importance of inference against some of the changing expectations of AI, navigating it in our diverse region, and also some of the challenges around it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's a lot going on, so.
There sure is. Okay, look, normally I would ask for an introduction of what Akamai does, but I think the world knows what you guys do, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when you introduce yourself and you say I work at Akamai, people don't say, what is that? They're just like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's changed, though, is a lot of people, know that we sort of invented the CDN, and they think of us in delivery, and they think of us in security. But they don't really think about us in the AI landscape or as the infrastructure providers.
Let's change their mind.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it. Okay. Let's jump right into this. Inference has become the economic center of gravity in AI deployment. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, right? But how should enterprises rethink their AI strategy now that the competitive challenge is less about training frontier models and more about delivering low latency, cost-efficient, reliable inference at scale?
Yeah, there is, as I said before, a lot going on in this space. And, I think last year and this year, we've seen a lot of organizations really pivot, as you said, away from training and really around operationalizing AI. And for the most part, that really comes from the inference side of things. When we think about training versus inference, it really is about sort of, the creation of a model versus actually delivering the value of that model. And as organizations start to deploy their operations and start to think about integrating AI into their applications and into how they interact with customers, they should focus on not implementing AI. I think for a lot of organizations, they sometimes think about AI as the goal.
Right.
AI is not the goal. They really need to think about what the goal is of their organization and treat it just like another project. AI is a tool which needs to be utilized. And as they start to investigate that, and as they think about it in that way, then all sorts of different types of architectures can be thought about. If you think about AI as the goal, then you think about, what is the latency for the customer? Where is my customer? My customer isn't in a data center. Why would I necessarily want my AI inference to run where my data is instead of where the people live, where the robots live, where the devices live that it needs to interact with? And so that's what we're seeing from organizations today.
Do you get the sense, because this is a really good point, right? Like nobody thinks about installing Microsoft, and I'm going to go back 20 years or 30 years, right? But nobody thinks about installing Microsoft Excel because that's the goal. They want to do sort of financial analysis and financial calculations. Then when you can get real-time data into it, your goal changes. Are you finding that when you do talk to big enterprises that maybe they're a little too skewed to, we just want to get AI implemented and they're forgetting about what they actually want to do? Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of organizations rush out with AI projects, with middling success. Sometimes they don't know how to measure the success. Sometimes they do measure it only after they do these large-scale implementations and they realize that it provides no value. I was talking to a customer recently in India, and they were rolling out an application to generate images. This was essentially like a marketplace, and they were doing AI-generated images.
Got it.
And they realized that it was costing them around 6 rupees per image generated. And only after they implemented did they realize they really needed to bring that down to around 1 rupee before it actually made sense to do.
Right.
So yes, we definitely see organizations rushing to build something and delivering it, and not sort of taking those core project management approaches that they should be using.
So you bring up another really good point. I was reading an article a couple of days ago about Uber, and I forget the name of the Uber CTO, but he said, we've already burned through our entire AI budget. He was talking about using Claude Code, and that their engineering teams were using it so much that they just burned through the whole budget. Do you also think that some of the enterprises with whom you're dealing don't understand yet? Because you said this 6 rupees versus 1 rupee. Some of that has to be the token cost, right? That they're misunderstanding. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a mindset shift that organizations need to go through, right? To sort of think about, these per use costs, and in the case of AI, these token costs.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's been experimenting with AI on their own probably has run into this issue as well.
We have.
I had a runaway process the other day for my own personal project.
Right.
It just consumed $26 in a single day, and I was just like, what was it doing?
Right.
I actually don't know. It was just it got into sort of an issue where the AI was just thrashing, and it just was using tokens. So yes, it is a different approach, and they do need to think about that. They do need to think about, again, what is the value that I'm trying to get here, and how much am I willing to spend in order to extract that value, right? And they need to be able to measure, that outcome, the value of the outcome versus the value of the cost of generating that outcome.
How do we explain to people the experience that you had with this sort of, I won't say a runaway agent, but we've had the same experience. And unfortunately, one of the things we did was we set it to run overnight while we were sleeping. So it was more than $26. It wasn't much more, but it was more. And I think that there's got to be, and I'm curious if you go through this with your enterprise customers as well, but there's got to be a way to understand that, like, sometimes the agentic AI just wants to do something, right? In other words, if it was a human and if it were an intern, they'd come to you and just go, look, I keep trying to solve this problem, but it's not working. What am I doing wrong? But the agentic AI, I don't think ever comes back and says that. They just, like you said, it just keeps thrashing. How do you explain that phenomenon to some of your clients so that they can build stuff around it so it doesn't keep happening?
Yeah, again, there's a level of expertise that's required in these implementations, which are really restricted to like a few thousand individuals globally, right?
Yeah.
There's essentially this issue of talent in this space in order to operationalize AI, primarily because it's just so new. It is all so new, and I have this conversation with my customers as well. Look, you're learning. Akamai is learning. NVIDIA is learning, right? We're all in this together, and we're all trying to figure out how to do things. And as with any technology, FinOps is kind of the last thing to get implemented. I mean, luckily, we've learned a lot in the security space, so that's no longer the last thing. Usually that comes before. But now FinOps is kind of the last thing to get explored in these spaces. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done in order to understand what is going on, what is costing so much. And until then, there are some sort of hard-defined rules, which I think is strange in the world of AI. But there's some deterministic rules, right, that you need to be able to implement to sort of help control those costs.
Right.
Putting timeouts on, putting budgets on specific agents, that you might be using internally. Yes, you want to experiment, but yes, you also want to really be able to control those costs and get notified in real time if, in fact, there are these runaway processes.
Do you get the sense that there's a lot of pressure on senior executives at some of these big companies just to do something in a way, right? Where like the board is saying to them, look, artificial intelligence is happening. I read every day about agentic AI. I'm on Twitter and I see people saying like they've solved this problem in 5 minutes and that Claude Code can write this thing while you're sleeping. Does that put pressure on the senior execs to get stuff done? Even like you said, there really are only like 1,000 people. We're learning every day as well. But what is that pressure like, and how does it manifest itself, at least in your interactions?
Yeah, the pressure is gigantic. I think everybody understands the shift that is happening, because of AI, and there is a rush to be part of it. And there's certainly value in learning early and experimenting with that.
Agreed.
And trying to understand how AI is going to affect your organization or you personally, right? How does it affect your personal career? I think that as we start to explore these spaces, we really do need to sort of back up and think about, again, what is the goal of the organization and how am I going to do this, and be able to explore this in a safe way, because there is a lot of pressure. I mean, you can see, companies sort of doing pivots in real time in the marketplace and seeing their stock go up by over 500%, right? Just because they've switched to an AI company.
You're not talking about Newbird.
Yeah. So, it is a crazy time, and shareholders also want to hear about sort of what organizations are doing for AI and how they are sort of de-risking in this space, and being, they want their organizations that they're investing in to be a part of this change and not just sitting back and watching. But we definitely need to make sure that as executives within these organizations, that we are understanding how we can experiment safely, how we can continue to learn without putting our organization at an undue risk.
It's interesting because you said at the beginning of this conversation that Akamai is known very well for things like inventing the CDN. And the CDN concept, like what happens behind the scenes for a CDN, is insanely complicated. Let's just leave it at that. It's just insanely complicated. And I think most people who use the internet don't even know that like they're dealing with the CDN, but let's leave that off to the side. But people do understand that stuff is getting served to them, right? But the second thing you said was security, right? People understand that too. They know they need to be protected. But again, it's an easy concept to understand. Lock the doors, close the windows, turn the lights off, that kind of thing. Is this the first time you think in your lifetime experience at work where the product that's getting rolled out is just something that so few people understand at scale? Because again, I've seen multiple tech cycles as well. But this is the first time where I feel like something rolls out and people are like, what do we do with this? Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, I think we've all been part of sort of the shift to the cloud. And I thought then that things are moving rapidly, and that it was hard to sort of understand, what should I move, when should I move it. You had organizations sort of becoming cloud first organizations again without really understanding the value, and you see a lot of people sort of shifting back to on-prem implementations because they didn't see the value that they expected.
Right.
But for AI, this shift is so fast. It is so hard to keep up with. Every day I've got like a little agent doing little searches for me, sending me, notifications on just what's going on and what's happening, because it's impossible to sort of, get to get the signal from the noise, right? There's so much noise going on, and it's hard to sort of understand what's important. So for me, this is definitely, a more rapid change than I'd seen in the past. Absolutely.
Can we go back to something that you talked about at the beginning, but maybe dig a little bit deeper, right? So in a region as diverse as, let's say, Southeast Asia, but even APAC in general, right? Where like the network quality, regulatory regimes, data residency, everything's different everywhere, right? So it's kind of complicated. How do you decide where this inference should actually live? This was one of the things you brought up at the beginning, but how do you go through that decision-making process to figure out where that should actually happen?
Yeah. Look, I mean, a lot of it, again, is coming back to sort of project fundamentals, right? So, you need to have those same sorts of checks whenever you're rolling out these applications, the same checks on privacy, the same checks on security, the same checks on compliance. And you need to understand where the data lives. You need to understand what the risk is when you're doing inference on that data. You need to understand especially in an agentic landscape, every single agent that your agent talks to, what is it doing with the data? What am I risking when I'm sharing this data? And understanding, how they are going to use that data. And I think that's, again, something that we don't have today. This level of trust between these agents, in particular, because they are so, non-deterministic, and the way that these agents are trained, it is hard to sort of, understand exactly what they're going to do with that data. So until then, we do have to fall back on sort of thinking about sort of where am I running this, and am I exposing my customers to undue risk, or am I falling outside of compliance guidelines for a particular government? So that's a really tough thing to do.
Are you also experiencing this thing called NHI, so non-human identity? Are people talking about this still? Where like you spin up this agent, but then that agent is actually kind of an employee of the firm as well? Are people starting to build rules around that, or is that still way too far ahead for them?
It is So, I've spoken actually just recently. I was in an AI expo in Tokyo,
Okay.
and I was talking with a small startup there that is doing exactly that. They're creating these non-human, these non-human
Identities, yeah?
identities. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And it is very early. It is very early. I think there's definitely potential here for these non-human identities, in particular, being able to have a certain level of skill and expertise, right? Being able to sort of like pivot and train them for a very, very specific thing that you might not be able to train a human to do. And establishing that trust network, or establishing sort of that social network of trust between these non-human identities, is something that's certainly being explored, but it is so
It
early,
is.
and it is so difficult, again, because even these non-human identities are dependent on these foundational models, again, which they have no control over the training of. It is something that is going to have to evolve over time.
Do you get the sense as well that instead of using somebody else's model, excuse me, that firms are going to start building their own sort of bespoke models just for the thing that they care about the most, right? Where like someone's going to build, like an insurance company is just going to build a bespoke sort of, I won't even call it an LLM, but just like an inference model that just deals with the things that they're talking about. And then what is the impact on companies like Anthropic or companies like OpenAI if internally people start doing that, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is certainly, the value of like true agentic networks is, right. You can have these deep specializations and these deep skills with these smaller language models,
Yeah.
that can be very focused and do one thing very, very well, and then the overarching agent can find those skills, use those skills, and perhaps even sort of providing a platform of supply and demand for each one of those skills in order to make sure that each one of those people gets paid. I think the value in some of the things that OpenAI and Anthropic doing is really providing that agentic glue. How does this all come together? How do we understand what skills are available and out there, and knowing that you still need that generalist model, or that maybe specialist orchestration capability, in order to bring all of those things together.
Yeah. I just feel like it's so much fun to be involved in this business right now. I feel like I could keep you here forever. Let me ask you one more thing. Let's one more topic at least, right? When you look across cloud, edge, and on-device compute, what are some of the most important architectural trade-offs that senior leaders need to know about that they may not know about right now?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really need to do is realize that AI should be there to benefit the real world. And the physical world does not live inside of a data center,
Yeah.
right? It actually lives out at the edge. So knowing that, knowing that this value exists out there, knowing that the people exist out there, the people's devices, the autonomous vehicles that need to be orchestrated, all of those real world things need AI inference. Now you can make smarter decisions around where that inference lies. Is this something that needs to be on device because maybe the network isn't reliable, and I need it to have that capability at all times?
Yep.
Is there value of having it at an edge location? Because autonomous vehicles is a good example, because it needs to aggregate data at a metro level instead of at a global level,
Good
right? I don't
example,
want
but yeah.
a single data center that is doing that. And that also gives me a capability to do a couple of things, in this new world of inference, which is be able to react in near real time, in less than 10 milliseconds rather than hundreds of milliseconds, which can mean a lot.
Yeah.
And it also gives us a capability to not just react in real time, but to also reinforce the learning and hyper-localize what I'm learning in real time as well. So using things like federated learning capabilities, which has been around for years, but really hasn't been implemented at scale.
Yeah.
But it's going to become more and more important over time as we think about where data lives, where data is created, and how we quickly get value from that data.
Okay, Jay. I want to thank you so much for coming and doing this today. This was perfect. I really appreciate your time. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you. It was fun.
Jin, thank you so much for joining us. We wanted to have you on to talk about how internal teams can actually build and deploy AI agents themselves, not just go out and buy SaaS tools, but get their ops, finance, and product people running agentic workflows using tools like Claude Code. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about Tictag.
Cool. Yeah. So Tictag, we are a Series A company. We've been out here in the market in the APAC region for close to 6 years now.
Awesome.
We are currently Series A, and we have been deploying enterprise AI solutions for our clients like Qualcomm, Samsung, Hyundai in Singapore, based out of Singapore, and 5 offices in Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, Indonesia. So pretty much we are very much in the AI space
Awesome.
for the longest time. And yeah, I think things have been changing very rapidly, especially for the past 2 quarters. Uh,
You think?
Especially since Cloud Code has made such a significant change and improvements, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what's the biggest thing that's different between 6 years ago, where there was still some stuff going on in the AI space, but not like it is today. And I love the way you framed this, right? It's really like in the last 6 months. Because even generative AI, which is super cool, and we use every day in our business, I'm sure you use it in yours as well.
Mhm.
It's a different animal, though, than agentic AI. Right? And maybe can we talk about this? Because you do have, like you said, Hyundai, Qualcomm. These are like real big established incumbent companies, right? These are not like SMEs somewhere. What is working in the enterprise that you see, and what is still mostly where they're just like, I don't know, we're not really sure what to do kind of thing?
Right. So I think enterprise AI solutions, uh, very much when we built out the solution itself, it's very specific, very much part of the value chain. More often than not, they have the budget, they have the ambition to do something,
Yep.
but they may not have the ability to deliver it because of the expertise. So when we look at things like computer vision, there's a little bit slightly different from agentic AI.
Tell me.
That's we're using CCTV cameras as well as like footages, images, etc. Those would require specific expertise for us to deploy for them, right? So, for example, manufacturing, we are looking at defects on. You have drill bits, right? Micro defects that's on drill bits. Those you require specific hardware as well as like software and expertise to build it up. But when you think about agentic AI, is very much what we see in terms of building of software engineering type of products, right?
Got it.
So it's a little bit different, but definitely the AI space is huge. There's a wide spectrum of things that we do, including audio as well. So that's for Qualcomm as an example.
Yeah. Do you feel like some of these big enterprises, like you said, are not, I don't want to say not qualified, right? Because that sounds a little bit derogatory, but just like the tech is moving so fast that they haven't not been able to build up the sort of muscles yet to do this. And that like that's where guys like you come in. Like, how are they trying to balance this thing? Because this is something that you mentioned you want to talk about. How are they trying to balance this idea of, should we just go out and get a SaaS tool to do this, or should we build agentic AI internally and teach our people how to do it so that then we can be way more, I hate to use this word, but autonomous and separate from some of these SaaS tools? Yeah.
Right. So I think many of these enterprise companies, right, that we've seen,
Mm-hmm.
or the teams that we spoke to, a lot of times we hear the ambition as well as the direction coming from the C-suite, saying that okay, there's this cool thing going on, lots of improvement in AI. Let's push it down, right? Let's try and see where can we improve. I think 2025 is all about POCs, a lot about testing, trials, figuring things out. In the B2B space, is a lot of importance is placed on the success of POC before they go into production.
Right.
Talking about the muscles and talking about like how they can actually get the most out of AI solutions. A lot of times when we think about it, is that would you want to focus more on your what you're good at, or do you want to expand your R&D team to explore the AI solutions? Now, working with partners like us, typically it's a little bit faster. As far as the domain knowledge is important.
Yep.
In retail space, that is quite similar because they use KPIs like dollar per square feet, customer behaviors. Generally speaking, these are things that we learn across different organizations that can be reused for each of these clients. Now, then we go specific into the customized workflow. Now, if we will do internal training, which I also do here, there's a lot more demand right now for internal training to have their operations team building up their own solutions. A lot of times it depends on the technical understanding, not so much of technical ability to build it up, but the understanding of how do you apply the tech on your day-to-day job. It's still currently at the stage of productivity, self-improvement, your day-to-day job, not so much on the bigger value chain, right? The entire systems like quality control on palm fruits, going through machineries, right? Those are the kinds that requires a little bit more expertise and heavier equipment, better cameras that may not be available for using agentic AI.
So you mentioned that, and I've heard this a lot actually recently, that the board and the C-suite are really convinced that this is some kind of magical new thing that needs to get implemented like sooner rather than later. But is there a little bit of a mismatch between like we need to implement AI as opposed to we need to use AI to solve these to get to these goals that we want to get to? Then there's a mindset change, right? In other words, implementing AI and solving like a goal problem are two completely different things, right? Do you have to change people's mindset and say this tool is super powerful, but at the end of the day, it's a tool. You need to learn how to use it to accomplish something, not just to implement it. Does that make sense?
You're absolutely right. So a lot of times, what they hear on the internet, the
Yeah,
news, and all, that's what they want to do. Like for example, cost savings for 75%. Those
sure.
are the numbers they always be thinking about. But when it comes to implementation on the ground, what we really want to do is really have that AI solutions helping them doing the actual cost reduction, optimization, etc. using AI solutions.
Mhm.
I think that itself is the one that really helps the business gets better at what they do. But at the same time, I think there are some C-suites that tends to be a little bit more well researched in this space, and they know that they have to do testing right beforehand to know if it actually makes sense for a particular workflow or not. So those are the ones that really actually excel a lot more. They tend to have like phased approach as well as like KPIs that they want to hit.
Mm.
For example, retail clients, they want to know if changing our specific SKUs to the front or the back, does that really make sense or justify the cost that they're paying for the AI? And then they go ahead and push it into a production project.
What has to happen? Everything just to get back to this topic of like they may not be prepared, they haven't built up the muscles yet. And again, you said last year was POC, 2025 was POC, but even in 2025, you couldn't really POC agentic AI because it hadn't really been released yet, right? So,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
now that it's moving so fast, a lot of these big savings are going to happen with agentic AI because it's going to be able to go out and do things at scale that humans can't necessarily do. But how do you change the mindset of people so that again they can start to feel like I can build this myself and I don't necessarily have to rely just on like an IT team? What has to happen? What has to change for that actually to be affected?
Right. So in fact, throughout my process, because part of what we do is a little bit of like consulting, like where
You
we
have to in
work
a way,
together
don't
with the
you?
client.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So the first part is pretty much I show you, right? I show you how it's done. I do with you, and then finally I do for you, right? Where you get to the I do for you portion is where they realize, okay, maybe I do not have a technical expertise.
mm,
Now, when we work with any of these clients, we typically want to understand where is their capabilities, their technical capabilities or their technical team, or their understanding of the current state of AI. That will really help us know at which phase do we come in. Now, if it's about giving them the basic understanding of like what Cloud Code can do, how do we make it like easily accessible for you to improve your day-to-day productivity,
right.
that will be our step one. But if they come to the point where they say, okay, yeah, great, we know how to do it, but we have something that's a little bit more that gets us across the 80% portion of optimization. I want to go to 90%, 95. That's where they bring us in and say, okay, how do we actually fine tune this or bring this into the next phase of the AI building, right? So a lot of times is figuring out where exactly our partners are as an organization, as a team, in terms of the knowledge, as well as like the how up to date they are, right? Claude is releasing every single week
I
3 or 4
know. It's
features.
insane. What are we
It's crazy.
doing?
Yeah, personally I'm studying like or building between like 7 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Sure.
I just couldn't catch up, right? It's just too much things that are rolled out every single day.
If you think it's hard for you, how do you think it feels for the Claude Code team? Those guys are cranking it out. It's like insanity over there, right?
Exactly. And in fact, there was this saying that say, okay, vibe coded features cannot be used, and that was like October, November of last year.
Last year.
But this year, I think they released a lot of features to do security checks, infrastructure,
Yep.
um, to make it more production ready. So it's really figuring out where is their starting point, how do we bridge them to the next next phase where they say, okay, this is the state of AI. You can actually use the latest state of AI, and what you need to look out for in terms of the gap that you will still need an external party to be helping you out on.
So how has Claude Code over time changed the way Tictag actually writes its own software? Because I presume you're updating your software all the time as well. As they make changes, you're going to make changes too. How has it changed the way you do it? And the context for me is this, and the number could be outdated because I read it 3 weeks ago. We're saying that the Claude Code team, boy, that's so hard for me to say. I don't know why. But that team is actually 60% of the code that they write is written by Claude itself. And I'm just curious, like, what you guys are doing, how it's changed the way you write software internally.
Right. So, I can answer this very technically as well as like business level, but I'll probably talk about it on a business level, right?
Mix in a little bit of both, if you don't mind.
A little bit,
A
okay,
little bit
yeah,
of both. Yeah, try to weave them together if that's okay.
cool. So I'll just give an example.
Yep.
We have been paying for SaaS solutions for the longest time.
Yep.
We talk about CRMs, we talk about internal HR systems,
Email writing
thousands of
systems, all that
dollars,
kind of stuff. Yeah.
exactly, outreach,
Yep.
all
Yep.
of that.
Yep.
We took approximately 2 weeks. People like myself, who's actually COO, right, and my co-founder CEO, we have tech background, but that's 10 years ago. We haven't touched a code since then. But we rebuilt systems. We rebuilt for ourselves, right? So
Yep.
instead of paying thousands of dollars a month, now we are talking about $0 because we use internal systems. That's using structure, using like ways of what they call clock scales, right?
Yeah.
Specific scales that builds up based on our requirements. And
Right. So,
even to
and one of the things that we found too, no, I love this. It's a great answer. One of the things that we found, you can tell I'm excited about this. Slow down, Michael. But one of the things that we found as well is that for these typical SaaS systems, they have so much, I won't call it bloat, right? But there's so much stuff in there that we don't need that we're paying for. And if you
exactly,
rewrite it just for yourself, you just get this really precise implementation of just what you need. And frankly, if you're like, oh, I wish we could do this, you just code it in. Yeah, it's just way better anyway. No.
you're totally right in that sense, right? Because for our company, we operate in 5 countries, and each of the 5 countries, just using the HR system as an example,
Yeah.
we talk about tax, leaves, public holidays, etc. I do not need the rest of the other countries. I just need to be fulfilling what I need for my own organization.
Yep.
So that makes it very easy in terms of our requirements when we draft it up and when we build it. When it comes to managing it, right? How do we do it internally? I think the technical aspects of things, even as of today, we're just talking to our CTO and figuring it out. Is in fact thinking about middleware, a layer that allows us to have adapters to each of these byte coded systems and software. So what I foresee in the foreseeable future is there's going to be many siloed byte coded applications, one by my CEO, one by myself, one by my operations head,
Yeah.
and we have to kind of integrate that back in. So that's where we need to figure out how exactly to allow them to build freely based on what they want, but at the same time being able to integrate that back. Because fundamentally, what Tictag believes is that ultimately our moat or any company's moat is going to be the data. And that is where we're going to bring everything back. And that will be the middle layer, connecting everything together for the data visualizations, the analysis, the AI agentic prediction and forecasting as an example.
Okay. I have a
Yep.
controversial question for you. It's not that controversial, to be fair. When you're rebuilding some of these SaaS systems that you were using, right? Like your CRM, your outreach programs, whichever one it is, do you also rebuild the UI, or are you just relying on the AI, the agent, to be the UI so that nobody has to use the user interface, but the user interface is, again, just the artificial intelligence interacting with the program? Does that make sense?
Mhm. It does. It does. We do have the UI in mind. Mainly because while some of us may be technical to use terminals, right, to interact directly
Fair
with the
enough.
agent,
Yep.
right? But usually our number one goal is to make it as easy for a 7-year-old or 8-year-old to navigate through.
So like me, you're
Um,
talking about. Go ahead.
but you're well versed in AI, so yeah, someone that may be looking at it for the first
I got
time
it.
and be able to execute on it. So that is our baseline understanding of user experience that we still want to adhere to, and we use skills. We use specific skills that have been built up, like UI UX Pro Max,
Hmm.
Impeccable. These are the very good ones that have very good guidelines that helps the AI to build based on best practices.
And do you build APIs as well when you're building this software, and are you using MCP to kind of communicate between all these different programs that you're writing?
Yeah, so I think the latest debate is about MCP, CLIs, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
two camps. I think personally, it's all about what you need, right? There are pros and cons, token usage, etc. Personal favorite, I think MCP has been great for 2025, but ultimately what we want to do is to have MCPs as well as some of the more complex ones to be handled by those adapters,
Yep.
right? But if you need something that's consistent, huge flow, those will still be APIs. And at the same time, if you're planning for the future, then you're thinking about connecting with other systems.
Yep.
Typically, API endpoints are still going to be reliable.
Yeah. I mean, they've been working for decades, right? Let's talk
Exactly.
about some of your clients again. Once their internal teams start building their own agents, I mean, there are a few things that need to be talked about, right? Do you, from a consulting standpoint, do you guide them or coach them on the fact that, like, I always like to equate this with like an intern. If you give an intern, a human intern, a job, and they try this, they try that, they try this, and it just doesn't work, they'll come back to you and they'll just say, Jin, it's not working. What am I doing wrong? But depending on how you build your agents, and we found this as well, and I've heard this in other conversations I've had, depending on how you build your agentic AI, your agent is just going to go out and try to do stuff. It's going to try to do something. It's good, like the guy that I spoke to earlier called it thrashing, right? And it may not stop. And that's actually could get pretty expensive if there's token usage associated with it. How do you coach these people to say, like, you can build an agent to do something, but you're also going to have to monitor whether it's actually accomplishing the thing you asked it to do or just trying to do something? Yeah.
Yeah. Very good question. I think personally, I've been burned. I've
Yeah.
been burning
Everybody
tokens.
has. Everybody has, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's the learning cost.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have multiple lectures coming to me as well from security, optimization of the agents,
Yep.
for planning, building, etc. I think when we first get to a client where, and it's a very typical answer or like question they will ask, right? So what's the difference between me and you? And how can I trust that you're actually better, right? In a sense, a lot of times the framework, the thought process, or even the way we build it itself, it's actually a knowledge that we share with our clients and say that
Yeah.
look, there are a lot of nuances to each of this that helps you over a longer period of time to be able to gain that efficiency or that ability to switch up certain things that you need to switch up, like LLMs, when they get better, right? So that education portion we can't exactly ignore. We have to bring them through a little bit of that 101 of what is the latest update or the best practice. Very simple version, and explain to them why it makes sense for them to understand that before we start execution.
Awesome. Okay, look, this has been a fabulous conversation. We'd love to have you back and do something even longer. Thank you so much, Jin, for coming and doing this today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hello, Anand. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We wanted to have you on to talk about how agentic AI is reshaping SME financing and digital lending in Southeast Asia. But first, just for some of our viewers, tell us a little bit about funding societies, please.
Hey, Michael, first of all, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. And such an exciting topic we have today. Happy to share some of our experiences with everyone.
Super.
So, Funding Society started in 2015. It's a premier digital financing and debt investment platform. Today, our presence spans 5 countries in Southeast Asia. We are in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And our niche lies in providing financing solution to SMEs, which are underserved by the traditional financial institutions.
For sure.
So these financial opportunities are funded not only by the individual investors, but also by the institutional players.
Yeah.
And Funding Societies recently acquired a payment platform called as CardUp in 2022.
Got it.
So it has been aimed at strengthening our payment-focused lending vertical, also to provide SMEs with seamless payment solutions.
Yeah.
And even though our product ranges have expanded significantly over the years, I believe that our core principles remain the same: how to make this financing intuitive, accessible, and efficient for the SMEs.
Perfect. Okay, really straightforward. Let's talk about artificial intelligence a little bit. How is AI transforming credit risk assessment and loan underwriting for your clients in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's a great question, because whenever we talk about this AI or transforming underwriting, it always takes me back to the great story in 2023. If you know that my bank popularized this 310 lending model,
Okay, go ahead.
which means it takes 3 minutes to apply via phone, 1 second to approve with zero human
Oh,
interventions,
wow.
and leveraging AI and big data to access the credit worthiness, reduce the obviously the lending risk, and providing the important part is providing the collateral free loans, obviously the small ticket ones, but enabling access for those SMEs with the low capital.
Right.
I think this was initially the start of that whole journey where everyone look at it and like, wow, this is something we should emulate, this is something we should aim for. And you will see that in Southeast Asia now, everyone, the biggest promise seems to be AI in SME in finance is all about autonomous lending. But what I believe, even though the autonomous lending is important, what is important and what we have observed is making more and more good businesses legible, turning messy, fragmented signals into usable risk insights, obviously while reducing the turnaround time, operating cost. So from my perspective, the hard part is not always about the model, or the hard part isn't always about how you are utilizing AI, even though it is important.
Yep.
The key is how you are building the trustworthy system around it, or how strong is your control plane, which means your fraud controls, your compliances, your investor protections, country by country regulatory realities, your monitoring.
Yeah.
So these two go hand in hand and form what we call as this AI backed underwriting or credit risk worthiness checks. So, but based on our experience, and we have definitely implemented AI intentionally over the years. We have been investing into predictive AI and generative AI ecosystem
Yep.
back, I think, from 2018. So we have some good understanding in this space. So what I feel is AI is actually helping to move this underwriting from narrow document based exercise to broader signal interpretation. So especially because, as we know, in Southeast Asia, SMEs have thin file, they have patchy statement,
Yeah.
limited collateral, very volatile cash cycles. So you cannot only rely on bureau data. So in most of the cases, you don't even have access to consistent bureau data or bank data. So then AI will definitely help you to extract or create a structure or create that pattern or signal from the different heterogeneous data sources and automating the workflow or your decision workflows. So if I have to think about four decisive shift brought upon by AI in
Tell me.
this space,
Yep.
one is the obviously, as I said, the better use of these fragmented SME signals, going beyond bureau data. Because the funny thing is, if you look at the US based ecosystem or even the super app based ecosystem in China, you cannot completely take that system and implement in the fragmented SEA market.
No.
And especially the interesting part is lot of this data, which we call it as alternate data, like bank transactional data, your e-commerce data, your payment data,
Yeah,
maybe
their bill
your
data, like everything, just
correct
completely
utility,
alternative data. Yeah.
exactly the utility and telco data. In this region, this serves as a primary data. In fact, not just as a alternate data, because this SMEs and the entire region has been born and bred upon this e-commerce mobile based ecosystem. So these data points form as
Right.
core data
That's the
sets.
foundational data actually of all these businesses,
Exactly.
right? It just
Yes.
is. It's not the same data that you would have in New York or in Boston or even in Singapore, but in Malaysia and Indonesia, in Vietnam for sure, and in Thailand, absolutely. If it's an SME, that's your foundational data. Yeah.
Yep. Spot on. Absolutely spot on. So this AI is definitely helping to connect all these fragmented SME data signals together, which is obviously leading to faster and consistent decision making.
Mm.
Because SMEs, see, they definitely care about price, but what they also care about time to cash, because they're always having such a cash crunch.
Right.
Your capital flow, workflow capital issues are always there. So just having a low price but taking 10 days to disburse a loan,
Doesn't help.
you're already lost the case.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
So definitely we have observed that AI has helped us to cut down the underwriting processing time as well as the cost per loan.
What was
So super.
Can I ask you about this? So you mentioned 310, right? So 3 seconds to apply, 1 second to get approved, and 0 human interaction. But that was in 2023.
Correct.
Right. So sure, maybe there was some generative AI. There was probably predictive AI that was useful back then, but there probably wasn't much generative AI that was useful then. And there definitely was no agentic AI. Right?
That's correct. That's correct.
So that
You're spot
310
on.
model was very powerful, but it was like a hint of something to come, right? Can we talk a little bit about how, from your business perspective, right? And agentic AI has really only been here for like 6 months. I mean, I've spoken to somebody recently and he said 2 quarters. So let's just call it 6 months, yeah? But it means, first of all, that you guys have to figure out how to use it and where to employ it in your business, and then use it as an interactive thing between you and your potential clients as well. Like, how has that changed the way you think about not even just the underwriting, but just like the business in general?
Okay, that's a great one. And I'm glad that you touched upon the 310 model again, because no matter what type of AI layer you are building on the top,
Yep.
I think it always starts with the core foundational data.
Exactly.
Because if your data is noisy, biased, or manipulated,
Yep.
your model will carry that in the output. Doesn't matter what type of layer you are building.
Does not matter at all.
So yeah. So obviously AI is only useful when it is combined with the stronger feature governance.
Yep.
You have a strong back-testing, fraud controls, and clear overriding policies, which means you need to have human in the loop. So even though you have agentic AI operating, and I'll go deeper into that, but wherever you have material credit exposure, you definitely need to have some sort of policies and human intervention to guide and orchestrate that AI.
Absolutely.
Correct. So I think agentic AI and the implementation and impact, even though it is few quarters old, it all depends on the AI maturity or the AI fluency of the organization. You will see this AI fluency word become a lot more popular with the Zapier coined it and made it very popular recently. So it depends on, if you look at their AI fluency rubric as well, and our observations are very similar. So it always starts with, hey, I'm using AI to operate at a higher level. B, then I'm using AI to orchestrate. And then C, I'm using AI to re-engineer how work is happening.
Right.
And that exactly the cycle we have followed while implementing our agentic AI workflows. And a lot of companies, I'm sure, are following in the region. Like, you will always, first of all, start to look at the opportunities to unify processes where you are reducing the human intervention in maybe your redundant and recurring workflows. Then you will graduate to, okay, now for our internal teams, how we can make sense of all the different data and build the co-pilots for them.
Right.
So they can take those decisions accurately and at the cheaper cost, rather than time spent in looking at the data, figuring out whether the data is correct. So once you have this foundation, then you can use agentic AI to orchestrate. So what does that mean? So which means your different agents running as per your instruction, as per their characteristic, what you have built and defined, and they will coordinate actions across systems, people, and policies. Correct?
Yeah.
So especially, I think what we have observed, that agentic AI is definitely has been super useful in graduating to a kind of small ticket underwriting, or what we have implemented in few countries is self-served digital loan application, including the offer acceptance experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely helpful. So but as and when you go into that material exposure zone, your credit risk policies has to support the agentic AI operations. So that's where I feel that agentic AI is useful, but use it with caution.
Yeah.
In another areas where we have also used it is KYC, KYB, fraud and anomaly investigations, portfolio monitoring, again, important one, and collection and restructuring support.
Yeah.
I'm not going into the very standard use cases of, okay, these are my chatbots talking to another, or agents talking to one another, or we are using and chained agents to make a call, then understand what happened on the call, transcribe that call, come up with the insights, and then, for the collections and
Right.
sales, these are, I think, very standard applications now.
For sure.
But let
Go ahead.
let me just give you one example though,
Please.
because debt crowdfunding is one of the key area, and it is where how
Interesting.
agentic AI can be useful,
So
because it's a very double trust challenge.
Debt crowdfunding, yeah?
Correct,
Go ahead.
correct.
Okay, interesting.
Because in balance sheet lending, as you know, that you can manage the borrower and platform risk.
Yep.
You just have to manage your borrower and platform risk. But debt crowdfunding, you also have to manage the investor understanding
Well, now you're talking
and
about
their
now you're talking about a
expectations.
two-way market, right? So there's the
Exactly.
investors over here. There's you guys in the middle that are doing the underwriting or trying to understand, is this credit worthy? So you're doing that analysis. They're trusting you to do that credit analysis. And then you have the customers, the borrowers on the other side saying, I need my money as fast as possible, right? Because you said 10 days could be a death knell, yeah?
Yeah. And these third parties, investors, their interests may not always perfectly align with the platform and borrowers.
Exactly.
So then that is where agentic AI also been very useful in making the right disclosure,
Oh,
providing the rating consistencies, providing the right set of risk explanations, also helping proper investor matching
yeah.
based on their risk
I
appetite.
was gonna say, how do you do that, right? So I traded government bonds, but I also sat next to the corporate bond desk. But they were all rated, right? So you knew if it was AAA. I mean, the ratings agencies sometimes lie. That's, I think, a fair thing for me to say. Let them come after me and tell me that I'm wrong. But at least you got a sense for what they thought was real, right? And then you got into triple B, triple C, whatever it was. But there's no way to do that for these SMEs where, like you said, it's messy, it's disaggregated, it's fragmented. So how do you judge? And how do you even explain to the lenders what they're getting into, right? How do you categorize them? And then does AI help you do that as well?
Yeah. Without going into too much into the specific, I would say that's where, first of all, you need to have the clear explainability baked into
Yeah.
your system.
Yep.
What kind of, and then also the disclosures of what they are going to get and how you are evaluating or how your ratings came about,
Right.
and consistently rate them with the same whatever, practice what you preach.
Right.
And if there are any explanation of the risk, because sometimes you see a lot of platforms go into this uh, very technical language, but rather than simplify it for the user, that's how you will build the trust and then
sure.
keep that platform discipline going.
Yeah.
So so that has been our, I would say, the DNA of how we have been operating so far.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
But we also sometimes we all have also used agentic AI for helping the portfolio auto reconstruction, because many times these investors are not aware, or they may take bad decisions.
Whose
So okay,
portfolio
if you are
construction?
building
Your portfolio construction or your investor's portfolio construction?
investors portfolio construction,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. Do you do that for them? You build an agentic AI model for them to then do
Or
portfolio construction for them?
so we are, it is in the process where we can actually provide them a lot of insights on how those portfolios can be constructed based on their risk appetite, based on their goals. So
Very
it
interesting.
acts like their co-pilot
Yep, I got it.
on our platform. So yeah, so these are the some of the areas, I would say. So to summarize how we have been doing and how everyone should be doing in financial services,
Mhm.
is agentic AI first of all should be introduced where it reduces the operational friction and improves the control quality,
Yep.
but not where it removes accountability, because that is, I think, paramount. That is number one thing.
Right.
Because the closer you will get to the irreversible financial decisions,
Sure.
the more important this accountability becomes. And as a regulated fintech in most of the in all the markets, we need to be mindful about that. And even though you implement the AI or agentic AI, you need to have the guardrails. I always say that this autonomy has to be earned.
I was going to say, like, I wrote down I was going to ask you about that. If you look at the last thing I wrote down, I wrote, what kind of guardrails do you put in place? Like, that's exactly what the next question was. So I was going to ask you because, and for multiple reasons, right? Again, finance and regulated finance is way more sensitive to these types of things. But even in a vacuum, the agents sometimes go out and do things they're not accomplishing anything, but they're doing something just to be active. So you do have to put a whole bunch of guardrails around them in the same way that you would a regular employee, right? Like if you've been working on something for 2 hours and you can't figure it out, come ask me, as opposed to just mushing around, right?
Correct.
So how do you build those guardrails?
So, and I think when we spent a lot of time building the guardrails, even before we started putting models out there.
Got it.
Because as an organization, that's one thing what we believe is automation for throughput, but humans for accountability.
Yeah, fair enough.
So if you cannot explain what is happening within your own organization, forget about explaining to a third person or your users or a borrower or investor what is happening. Uh, so obviously automating as much as possible is a goal, but I think the key goal is always to decide which part of the workflows can be automated safely, which parts need escalation, and how you prove governance afterwards.
Yeah.
So that explainability is very important. And I think some of the guests that you had on your show,
Oh no.
that theme of explainability came through all the time.
Yeah.
That's such a key message
It
that
is.
you need to be able to explain how model is making the decision.
How did
So that explainability.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how do you decide who's accountable? Right? Because this is a question I have all the time. If you have an NHI or a bunch of them out there activating and running around and doing things for you, right? These agents, somebody has to be responsible for what their output is, right? Somebody has to be responsible if they make a mistake or they make an error. But even if they accomplish something great, somebody has to be accountable for that. How do you decide internally? And again, I don't need to know like every last detail, but is there a team of people sitting there going, we're going to build this stuff, but that is Anand's, he's accountable for that. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. So that's great because, and I would say that the regulators in the region also has been very practical about it, and they have been providing a lot of guidance, whether you have MS, FEAT principles or IMDA, agentic AI guidelines.
Yep.
So based on that, what you really need is the AI governance committee within your organization. Yes, a model ethics committee. Now, don't go by, just don't get scared. I would say everyone who is listening, don't get scared by those names. It all means that you need people, as you said, who is accountable, the people who are accountable to ensure that any decisions which are taken by the models are explainable. They are, let's say, if you are regulated by MAS, then it is as per the FEAT principle, you can operate it. So there is no bias. So first of all, I would say that there are no hallucinations cascading through multi-agent system. You need to be careful about that.
For sure.
There is no unbounded execution loop. So also ensure that this execution loops is bounded. And that's how also you will prove ROI. Otherwise, you will not be able to decide the ROI as well. If avoid any opaque reasoning models or any models which are not able to provide you any reasoning traces.
Mm-hmm.
So invest into getting those traces, observability, immutable audit logs, and this should satisfy how you are rating those models. Spend time is adding a lot of evals. So anything that you are putting out there, I think eval is such a deep topic. How you ensure that it is going to provide you the correct output under the different conditions, even though certain situation changes. Please also ensure that there is the bias amplification is not happening.
Right.
Because again, a lot of these models which are trained on a data which may not be Southeast Asia or generated here,
Right.
or like you might have seen those funny examples that sometimes the pictures were generated only with certain types, or the clock was always showing 10 by 10 because that's the data being fed to the model. Correct.
It's super interesting actually that you bring this up, because my business partner and I talk about this all the time. I get the sense, and let's just use, if you don't mind, OpenAI and Anthropic as like the proxies for every other AI company in the world. Yeah. I feel like that the OpenAI models maybe feel a little bit more like Sam Altman's personality is kind of embedded in there in some way. I have no facts to support this, but maybe that's just a feeling that I have. But I also feel like Anthropic is a more kind of well-oiled machine as a company. And I feel like their models are more precise, if that's fair. And since they're being written by humans and trained by humans, I feel like they have that personality. And I think you're right, because they're not regional specific. They miss some of the things out here that we would expect to behave in a certain way. Whereas maybe in California, that makes perfect sense to people. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely don't have the detailed inner working, but I like every one of us, I follow how their AI ethics team and
Yeah. Exactly.
super alignment teams are working.
Right.
But from if I had to talk about from our region's POV, then to ensure that the bias is mitigated, or you want to uh, maybe some you can invest into fairness testing. And MS Veritas provides certain toolkit for fairness testing.
Fair enough.
There is something called a tool called as AI Verify, which you can is directly useful. So you can also invest into, if you are worried about what type of data is being sent to LLM, you can also invest into your own open source LLM model.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
can train it based on your own data. So any historical data is kind of not really scrub, but you are retraining and training it based on what data is right for you. I think you can always take that uh, that path. It also will help you with one of the risk is reducing this third party concentration risk.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
let's say if every model, every company, every organization using only 2 and 3 models, so these shared failures will become
Exactly.
quite systematic.
Exactly.
And before getting into the discussion today, we are talking about this whole supply chain
Yeah.
issues
Yeah.
and the cascade failures that we should be aware of. So sometimes this concern is very underappreciated, but that's why then you need to maybe invest into your own models,
I
train
think
it on your own data rather than just relying on someone providing it for you, which you don't have much details about. Yeah,
okay.
because I would say if I had to summarize, because Southeast Asia is not one lending market. It's
No,
so
no.
fragmented across regulators, languages, accounting practices, digitization, different digitization levels, correct?
Yeah,
And different borrower behaviors as well, right?
for
So
sure. For sure.
any as an organization, what we have observed is any regional AI strategy has to be modular. It cannot be one size fit all,
No.
correct? So we run 5 markets, and we have sometimes by a lot of trial and error, we have learned by hard experience that it really has to be modular. So that's where then you can go out there, provide this productive access to capital, rely also the regulatory guidance, because they are doing, I think in my opinion, all the regulators in Southeast Asia are doing something really sophisticated. They are regulating the risk, but not the technology. Unlike certain places where the technology itself is banned, they have been very pragmatic
Yeah.
and proactive. So that's what I think as an organizations operating in financial space, we should rely on that as well.
Agreed. Look, I think we're super fortunate to live in a region where the regulators are actually kind of forward thinking and also really flexible, but
For,
still staying
for sure,
within the guardrails of like, we want to make sure that people are protected. Anyway,
for sure.
thank you so much for coming and doing this today. We love having Funding Society on as a guest. I'm sure we'll have you back again. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was great talking to you, and thanks for having me again.
Okay, that's it for ATP Insights. Thank you again to all of you for joining us today. Give us a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and follow us on all of our socials on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on our upcoming shows. We'd love to answer your questions in AMA. Leave comments or questions in any of the platforms where we exist. My name is Michael Waits. Bye for now.